Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Comic Sand podcast. Again, I'm your host, Dylan Jumps, and this is the show for people who enjoy hearing about comic book stories and other comic book related things, but don't necessarily want to read the comics. Now, today we're going to talk about one of those comic book related things and not necessarily a comic book story. What we'll be talking about is the Loki Disney Plus series that just finished up this past week. It was a great series for anyone who hasn't gotten a chance to watch it. This episode will make it to where if you haven't watched it and you feel like watching it, you'll get the backstory of, the comic book origins of Loki, which isn't too hard to explain, which I'll get into. And also what's been happening in the Marvel movies so far that have led to the Loki Disney Plus series. Next to me, I do have a comic book just to give, the visage of Loki in the comics. It's Avengers number 3. He is an off and on hero villain, mostly villain, but he is the protagonist of the Loki Disney Plus series. Now, trying again with this audio. I know on the last episode, I said the mic wasn't working. Let's hope that's not the case this time, but you will obviously know. So, to get into it, I'm just going to start with a brief origin of the character Loki. Now, in Norse mythology, which is, Thor, Odin, Loki, Balder, all of them, they come from Norse mythology, and they've been given an adapted the Marvel origins are an adapted Norse mythology. Loki is the god of mischief, or lies, stuff like that. He's usually an antagonist in the Thor comic books. In the comics, he is portrayed as Thor's brother, which isn't the case in actual Norse mythology. He's just he's just around. He's just one of the gods that lives in Asgard with, all of those other Norse gods. In the comics, though, he is Thor's adopted brother. So not Odin's biological son, but being the actual son of one of Odin's enemies, King Laufey. He's a frost giant. So not one of the Asgardians. He's a frost giant, which are pretty much sworn enemies of the Asgardians. And that explains the differences between Thor and Loki's last names. It's Thor Odinson in the comics because he is Odin's son. And that's why you'll hear in the Disney Plus series, Loki Laufey's son, because he is Laufey's son. And so in the comics, both Thor and Loki were born to be kings, which does feed into the conflict between them a lot of the time, because Loki, isn't going to end up being the king of Asgard. It's Thor. And so that's pretty much all you need to know as far as Loki's origins, because really, as far as origins, he's supposed to have been around before us humans. So I'll go ahead and go over what's happened in the MCU, or Marvel Cinematic Universe, so far. Pretty much, in the first Thor movie, Loki tries to take over Asgard, and he fails. In the first Avengers movie, if you'll remember, Loki does come to Earth, and he tries to take over Earth. That also fails. He like I said, he often dances the line between villain and hero, and throughout the rest of his appearances in the Marvel movies, we see him and Thor kind of get closer. Sometimes they're at odds. But ultimately, after, all these Marvel movies, we get to Infinity War, and Loki, after, false deaths in the past, he dies for real this time. He, is killed right in front of Thor. I don't know if you'll remember, on the ship, Thanos snaps his neck after Loki tries to stab him, which wasn't a very smart idea. So, in Endgame, though, what we see, which is the movie that comes right after Infinity War, in Endgame, we see the events of the first Avengers movie play out differently. At the end of the first Avengers movie, Loki fails, he's taken into custody and back to Asgard to be imprisoned. Now, in Endgame, there's a lot of time travel. And so we see the Avengers go back to the events of the first Avengers movie in order to, get the objects they needed to fight the Thanos in Endgame. And that's, a completely different story. But what it does is it alters what happens after Loki is taken. They actually inadvertently lead to Loki being able to escape custody. And that is where we pick up in the Loki series. So whereas the Loki that we've seen and the Loki we see die in Infinity War goes through his bouts of heroism and getting closer to Thor, the Loki in the Disney Plus series never went through any of that. And what happens is he gets away with the help of the Tesseract or Cosmic Cube because he was able to teleport. And so that leads us to, like I said, where we are at in the Loki series now. Loki, what he does when he gets away is he becomes what they'll refer to as a variant. And a variant is any version of events or any version of a person, character that goes off of the flow, the natural flow of time that's supposed to occur. And so Loki was not supposed to get away. It was the Avengers messing with time that led to this. And so now Loki is a variant. Shortly after he escapes, he gets caught by the TVA. And that's the Time Variance Authority. They work under the leadership of the 3 timekeepers to protect the natural flow of time. And so they go to, different branches of time when they're created, because there's under their authority, there's not supposed to be any branches off of time. And so what they do is they go to those branches of time and prune them, which, means that they erase what happens. They take any variants back to the TVA, Time Variance Authority, and they process them. And we'll get a little bit more into what actually that all entails. So when Loki gets to the TVA, he's questioned by an agent Mobius, who is a somewhat recurring character in the comics. I haven't read any comics with him specifically in them, but the TVA, Mobius, they're all previously established in the Marvel comics. Mobius has the idea to enlist this Loki variant to help them find another Loki variant that's causing the TVA a lot of trouble. Normally, it's not hard for the TVA to track down variants because they can lock on to where they are. But for some reason, they've been unable to track down this Loki variant. Once they do find the Loki variant, which actually happens because Loki, the main character, he realizes that in order to hide from the TVA, someone would need to hide in periods of time that are, pretty much world or civilization ending apocalypses, because any changes that someone makes when let's say an example that they actually go to Pompeii, the famous, the volcano explodes and kills everybody. They go there and they try to, make differences. They tell everyone, oh, you're all about to die, blah, blah, all of that stuff. And on this meter that they have that tracks the branches in time, nothing happens. So Loki proves that if someone were to jump through time and stay in these apocalypses and obviously leave before the world ends, then the TVA wouldn't know that they're there because any changes they make are not big enough to branch time. So pretty smart of this other Loki variant, who when they do catch up with, we find out is a female Loki variant. And there is in the comics, there's been times where Loki, because he is a shapeshifter, he's got magical powers. He was portrayed as a woman in the comics at certain points for certain series arcs and whatnot. That being said, this female Loki actually goes by the name Sylvie, and she's a completely original character. Pretty much everything that happens in this series is original. It's not really drawing from a comic book series. But it definitely has, what they call Easter eggs, and they allude to things that have happened in the comics. So Loki does find Sylvie and tracks her to an apocalypse it's not a real apocalypse that has happened in our world, like Pompeii and whatnot, but they go to this planet called Lamentis 1, and in this apocalypse the moon is coming towards the planet, and it's going to collide with the planet, and everyone on Lamentis 1 is going to die. There's supposed to be an arc that takes people off of the planet, but we know ultimately that arc is never going to leave. So any changes that happen aren't going to affect the Marvel Universe. Once they get there, the tool that they use to travel through time, that the TVA, all the agents have one of these, it breaks. So they're unable to escape this apocalypse easily, I guess I should say. And so they form an uneasy alliance because, two Lokis are going to be able to survive better than just one, as long as, they work together. And so ultimately, their plan does fail. Looks like they are going to die on Lamentis 1 because the Ark does get destroyed before they're able to make it to it and recharge their device so that they can hop off. While they're waiting to die, they do get a little bit closer. They learn more about each other. And right before, or at least, moments, the TVA is able to find the Lokis, and they bring them both back to the TVA's headquarters. And so once they're brought back, they're questioned a little bit, and ultimately are brought to the three timekeepers that are supposed to be, protecting the flow of time with the help of the TVA, or, they are the authority in the TVA. And so, so once they do get to the timekeepers, it's exposed that they're actually robots. They're not real, and even the TVA didn't know this. The head of the TVA did not know this, and once the Lokis, they're trying to escape. The main Loki, because just to make it simple, I'm going to refer to the Loki variant as Sylvie because that's what she goes by. So Loki, he gets pruned, like I was talking about before, and up until this point, the understanding has been that once you're pruned, you're just destroyed. You cease to exist. And so Sylvie sees this happen right in front of her eyes. She doesn't know what happens when you're pruned. And then we find out in an end credits scene that once you're pruned, you actually go to another place, which in the next episode we find out is the void at the end of time, or just before the void at the end of time. It is the end of time is where they send you, because there's nothing written after the end of time, and so that's where they send the variants. Uh, Once Loki does get to the end of time, he's met by three, well, technically four different variants of Loki. One is what they call the classic Loki. There's boastful Loki. There's kid Loki, and an alligator version of Loki. Now, obviously, classic Loki is, and they're alluding back to, who he is in the comics. Kid Loki is also a variant of Loki that exists in the comics. Although I believe that they may have changed his backstory, because they're doing their own stories. Boastful Loki, I've never personally read a story with him. I think he's an original character, and I've never seen an alligator Loki either. That doesn't mean that they don't exist in the comics, but there are a lot of comics, and so it is possible, but I haven't read anything that says that they've existed before. So once he's met by these Loki variants, they also explain to him that there's a temporal storm beast named Eliath that devours anything that it touches, and it disappears, destroyed, what have you. And Eliath just roams around the end of time, devouring everything. So we find that pretty much anyone who is surviving in the end of time is a variant of Loki, because Lokis always survive, is what they say. Now, Sylvie is back at the TVA still, not sure what happened to Loki. She's trying to figure it out, and ultimately ends up pruning herself to escape from the TVA, because they're trying to capture her again. And so she ends up at the end of time. Mobius has also been pruned at this point. I skipped over that, but that also happens. So Mobius and Sylvie meet up at the end of time, and they're now looking for Loki. Okay, and so Mobius and Sylvie, they do find all of the Lokis. Sylvie has a plan to enchant Eliath. A power that Sylvie does possess is enchanting, which means that she can touch someone and control their mind, momentarily. And so that's what she plans on doing with Eliath, because she believes that if she enchants Eliath, the giant storm beast, that Eliath will be able to lead them to whoever is really in charge of the TVA, since we've found out that the timekeepers are fake. They were robots the whole time. And so once she does enchant Eliath in a big battle between, I wouldn't necessarily call it a battle, but it is a very insane climactic scene where classic Loki he's really powerful, by the way, because he actually lived past the events of Infinity War where Loki was killed. He lived past it and went to live on I think a deserted planet in space, and was only found by the TVA when he tried to leave that planet. Which kind of goes into the reasoning behind how they weren't able to find Sylvie, because she wasn't doing enough to affect the timeline in those apocalypses. And so classic Loki does end up trying to, or does end up helping Loki and Sylvie by projecting a giant Asgard kingdom illusion, which takes the attention off of Sylvie and Loki from Eliath. Sylvie ultimately is able to enchant Eliath, and then a portal opens to a castle-looking thing. I guess you could just call it a castle. And so once they get there, they meet He Who Remains. That's the name that we've been given. I know who the character is, but I don't recall if they actually gave his name in the show. His name is Kang, though. It's Kang, and so he explains to the Lokis, or well, Loki and Sylvie. At this point, classic Loki has been killed by Eliath. Um, and so he who remains at the end of time, he lives in the void at the end of time, or past the end of time. And so he explains that the reason he's done everything that he does is that originally there were all these different branches of time, which, I mean, we'll come to know it as the multiverse, where there are as many different possibilities and realities as there are decisions made. If someone's given the decision to go to school or skip that day, then that's created two different realities. One where someone went to, regardless of the option they choose, there's now a reality where they choose to go to school and a reality where they skip class. And that's just, an arbitrary example, but I think you'll understand what I mean. And so he explains that originally there were all these different branches of time. He learned how to meet with the other versions of himself across the multiverse, across these timelines. And at first it was great. It was all the different Kangs. They were taking the best parts of their world and bringing them to the others. And so it was, there was a period of prosperity where, nothing was going wrong. But then, with there being countless variants, there are also variants that don't want to do good. There are evil versions of himself. And he says this. He says, if you think that I'm evil, wait until you meet my variants. And so he explains to Loki and Sylvie that in order to protect the timeline, he created the TVA to make sure that everything goes just down one path. Because if he's killed, then time starts to branch and all the different variants come into existence. And that's when he said, you should see my other variants if you think that I'm bad. And so Loki makes the case that he believes Kang, that He Who Remains. He believes him and doesn't think that they should kill him. Kang pretty much leaves it up to them. He's not going to fight it. He says, you can listen to me and you can help me do what I'm doing. And everything will go as it has been, or you can kill me. And see that I'm telling the truth and see the evil that comes from it. Sylvie kills him after kicking Loki through a time portal back to the TVA, and we start to see all the different branches of time going off, and we see that He Who Remains, he was telling the truth. And so Loki, the series ends with Loki running to Mobius, who's made it back to the TVA before the battle with Eliath happened. He stepped through a portal. He runs to Mobius, tries to tell him everything that's happened and what's going to happen. And Mobius is confused at who Loki is, as if he's never met him before. And so that's when Loki looks out of the window in the room that they're in and sees a statue of someone who looks like He Who Remains. But now I'll get into the speculation point of this episode. And so really what this means for the greater Marvel universe is now we're going to see this different versions of Kang that have appeared in the comic books before. The main version of Kang is Kang the Conqueror. And I believe that's who we see. That's the statue at the end of the Loki series, which apparently is going to come back for a season 2. It says at the end of the credits that Loki will return in season 2. And so we've got other movies coming out that deal with the multiverse, like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So really, it seems like it happens really quick in this finale of Loki, but what could happen moving forward is huge, because now we've got different realities with different versions of the heroes that we've already known through the first, period of Avengers movies, which they call the Infinity Saga. And so this opens the door for maybe new actors to come in and play characters that we already are familiar with. Captain America isn't in the main Marvel universe anymore, but who says that a new actor can't come in and play a Captain America from another universe? Same thing with Iron Man. Iron Man's dead in the Marvel universe, but now that there are countless different realities, who says that, an actor like, and I'm throwing this out there because I've heard this speculated, but who says that Tom Cruise doesn't come in and play a different version of Tony Stark? We don't know, and I don't know that that'll ever happen, but just an arbitrary example. So this really does open a lot of new possibilities for what's going to happen in the Marvel Universe. The content that can be created from this, I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting for anyone that gets excited by all of this stuff. This is insane. And so I'm excited to see what happens next. If there was anything about my explanation that didn't make sense, put it down in the comments. I'll respond to any comments, any questions, comments about what happened in the Loki series, or just anything comic book related. That being said, I mean, that sums up, Loki's origins, what happened in the Loki series, and what we might be able to expect from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, moving forward. To wrap this up, I was just going to, give you all a list of the Marvel movies coming out for the rest of 2021. A lot of exciting ones coming out. We've got Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is coming out soonest, and that's on September 3rd. It's going to be, it looks like it's really cool. If you haven't seen the trailer yet, I would suggest you do. Look that up on YouTube, and you'll see there's a lot of martial arts, but then mystical aspects to it. And so I'm excited for that one. I don't know how much it'll play into the greater, Marvel universe, but it looks like it's going to be a great origin movie for the Shang-Chi character. After that, there is going to be a movie called Eternals that releases on November 5th. I'm excited about Eternals because it's pretty much every Eternals movie will be like an Avengers movie in the way that it's a big ensemble cast. It's not just about one character. The Eternals are kind of like Earth's ancient defense system, and I'm excited to see how they incorporate them into the Marvel universe after all of the events of the Infinity Saga took place. Now, the third MCU movie coming out in 2021, or I guess before the end of 2021, I should say, because Black Widow already came out as well. But it's going to be Spider-Man No Way Home. And that comes out on December 17th. And that's going to I've heard a lot of crazy things about this one. I think it's also going to play into the multiverse a little bit. I've even heard that they're thinking about bringing back Tobey Maguire, or that they have brought back Tobey Maguire. Obviously, any decisions they've made have been made at this point. They are bringing back other people who have been in previous Spider-Man movies, and reprising the roles that they had. So like they're bringing back Alfred Molina, who played Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2, the one with Tobey Maguire. And he's supposed to be reprising his role. I've heard that he confirmed that his story in the Spider-Man movie picks up right where it ended in the original Spider-Man movies. So that's exciting. It will pretty much be a live action Spider-Verse movie, like how they created the animated Into the Spider-Verse with Miles Morales as Spider-Man. And so we'll see, though. I'm excited for that one. Now, those are the MCU movies coming out. I did want to bring up the Venom movie that's also coming out, which takes place in a different reality, or not. I wouldn't say reality, but it's not part of the Marvel Studios movies. Spider-Man and Spider-Man related characters are owned by Sony, which, if you guys are interested, I can do a whole video about how about the the history of Marvel Studios, which is owned by Disney, Sony, and Fox, all owning different intellectual properties when it comes to making movies, that are all really encompassed by the Marvel comic books, but made by different studios. And so, even though Spider-Man gets used in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, any others like Venom, which the second movie is coming out September 24th. That's as I had referred to in the last video, that will be Venom: Let There Be Carnage. That's going to be starring Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson, and should be really good. Even though it's not part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Venom sequel, as well as the first Venom movie, should be really great. And so, again, any questions that you have about anything I talked about, any questions about things you would like me to talk about, go ahead and drop those in the comments. Hopefully the audio worked out, like I said. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed, and also enjoy the rest of the day.